This game is truly unique and has such a high learning curve. However, once you get into it, it's much simpler than it looks. I'm here to break down the entire game for you while avoiding spoilers. No matter how much you play, there will always be something for you to learn. So if you have anything that you want to add, please put it down in the comments. But for now, let's get into it. Now, you've played games like this before. Your first instinct is probably to hit a tree. Yeah, that doesn't work here. You're gonna get nowhere with this. To get into the Copper Age, we're gonna have to do a lot while surviving. One of the first things that you want to start doing is find a ton of native copper bits. You want to start picking that up. But we want to mark it down for later because under all the copper bits that you find is usually a copper deposit shortly under it. And as soon as we get our pickaxe, we're coming back to that copper to grab a whole bunch more. If you need some sticks, you can always just go and hit some leaves. Alternatively, you can find some by running around forests, and you might find some on the ground. I happen to spawn next to a trader. Each trader caravan will look something like this. This one is a commodities trader. Nothing I really care about, but we can sell some stuff to her. So anyway, right now we're looking for flint, which I just happened to find some. You can hold shift and right click on the ground with the flint, and it brings up this prompt with a bunch of tools. You'll notice that pickaxe is not one of them. However, a knife is, and a knife is incredibly useful. So I can see more flint over here, which we can use to start shaping this knife. But let's get this made. And we can combine it in our crafting menu to make a knife. By the way, if you noticed, there is no inventory up here yet, and all we can hold is on our hotbar. So you can see my health bar over here, and my hunger bars over here. We're already going down in hunger, and I don't want to starve. The best early game food right off the bat would be berries. You can find bushes all around, and they're a great food source. Here's a berry bush. This is exactly what we were looking for. You can just hold right click on it, you'll get your berries, and then you can eat up. No reason to starve in the early days. You can actually just break them down and pick them up, and then you can bring them back to your base and replant them. Over here is the best thing that you can find. It's called cattail. You'll typically find it in water sources. You just take out your knife, you hold left click on it, and you'll get cattails. You'll notice that it broke into two. If you hold left click on that, you'll get a root. Roots are pretty great. You can eat them if you need to. However, they're very poor on food and nutrition. But you can grab them, bring them anywhere you want, and replant them. Cattails used for a whole variety of things. However, the main thing that we're looking for right now is a backpack. Or in this case, it would be baskets, which can give us more inventory spots. I got 20 cattails, which means I can drop it into my crafting bar right here. If we align it like this, we can make a basket. I actually had enough for 2 baskets. So now we have 6 inventory spaces that we can use. And down here, we have room for 2 more. I just noticed that there's flax on the ground right here. You want to be picking that up. It's pretty much our main goal right now is to find a bunch of flax and other wild crops. I recommend that you do an insane amount of exploring. Don't worry too much about picking up every little thing, except for the copper and all the seeds that you can find. You want to stay clear of the blueberry bushes if you can, especially right now. If you see a blueberry bush, there's a good chance that there might be a bear nearby, and we are not fighting off a bear. Speaking of combat, we're gonna drop down another flint, and we're gonna craft a flint spear. We're gonna make the spearhead real quick, drop it on a stick. Now we have a primitive weapon. You can obviously jab with it, or hold right click to throw it, which me as a hunter does more throwing damage, so throwing spears is a great idea for me right now. This is something that you need to be aware of. That's a temporal rift right there. They can be extremely dangerous and enemies can spawn around it. I wouldn't be hanging out around these. By the way, something cool that you might not know is if you stand in it, you'll see the little wheel spinning. That's your temporal stability going down, and if you stay in it too long, you might just see Dave. Hi Dave. Anyway, I'm gonna get back out, and now my stability is going back up. Oh, this is really cool to show you guys. I don't see too many people talking about it, but you can see that my temporal stability is going down right now, and there's no portal here. This land itself is not stable. So if you were to build a house here, you would go insane and stuff would attack you pretty much 24/7. So whenever you're trying to set up a home, keep that in mind. By the way, if you press C, you can open up this menu and you can see it's right about to turn 18, which means that it is going to be nighttime soon. You can also see other stuff like your nutrition, but just know the more food of a certain variety that you eat, the higher the bar, which will result you into having more health. But it is becoming dark out. This is about the time that I should show you guys how to make a torch. I'm not too worried about this on the first night. If we need to, I can always just dig a hole in the ground. There's no shame in surviving, okay? So pull out your knife and just left click the grass. You'll notice that you'll get dried grass, which is exactly what we're looking for. If you combine it with sticks, you can get torches. And if you combine it with 2 sticks, you can get a fire starter. If you place a torch on the ground, you go up to it with the fire starter, you can light it. And you can take your other torches and light them directly off of this torch. And now we have a source of light. You can always stick it into your offhand. That way you have your main hand to continue to do stuff. So right now we're desperately looking for clay. If I can find clay, we'll be able to start smelting our copper. On top of that, we need it to start making pottery, which is necessary to do a whole bunch of things like the smithing, but also cooking and a whole lot of other stuff. But it is nighttime and I happen to just stumble upon another trader, an agricultural trader. What's useful about that is he has a bed which we are gonna borrow. Didn't even have to make one. And it's day 2. Okay, perfect. I found clay. However, I did notice that there's 2 bears sitting up there. We're going to attempt to get this clay without bothering any of them. It should be doable. Let's go ahead. Let's pick up some clay. Right now, we need to set up a house. And setting up near some water would be incredibly nice. That way, we can utilize it for our farm. You can see that this says medium fertility soil. It is amazing for growing crops on. And it's such a solid find right now. So what we can do real quick is we can craft a flint hoe and we can use it to till the farmland. The flax is the main thing I care about. I'll be going into further depth about farming later on. Right now we're just worried about getting this started. Now that we have that down, we're just gonna get a small dirt hut out. And here we go. We got a small 3x3 hut. And we're going to work on making a crude door, which means that we need to cut down a tree. But let's make an axe real quick. Obviously, you just hold left click on it, but you do it on the very bottom. And once it's done, the entire tree will collapse. And now we should have enough for that door. We craft it like that. We can just slap it on the front. I need to make a fence real quick. And I don't know the recipe, so I'm looking it up in my handbook, which you do by pressing H. And it'll open this up. You can type whatever you want in. Like in this case, I'm trying to make a wattle fence. So now it tells me the recipe. Really handy. I can't recommend it enough. You should definitely do it. By the way, I have mine so I can move it to wherever I want. I put it to the left. That way I can still see it while I'm crafting things. It is incredibly useful. You do it by here. And then you can make it fixed or movable. You should definitely try that out. But I'm going to place that fence there. And it's like a primitive window. The last thing that we need to do to make it a proper house is just get a bed. So we're going to collect a whole bunch of grass real quick until you have about 24. Now we can make 3 things of hay, which turns into 1 bed. We'll place the bed down and now we can sleep at night. This does not set your spawn, so don't count on that doing that. We're gonna start doing some pottery. So we're gonna grab some red clay. You hold shift and right click the ground. Some of the things that we need to do right off the bat is the crucible, a regular bowl, a cooking pot, a raw pickaxe mold, a hammer mold, and a prospecting pick mold would be amazing. So what you need to do is you click on one of the molds that you want to make. And you basically do it like you're making your tools. You just follow the little outlines that it makes. And if you press F, you can open up this menu right here. So if you want to do more at once, you can. And there's even this one, duplicate. You can see the last one that I did was the one under it. If I hold right click, it'll just keep doing the same thing that I did last. Which you'll need to stop once you reach the top or it changes. But yeah, there we go. We got 1 crucible. What we're going to do is dig out a bunch of holes in the ground. Then you pick up all your molds. You can place them into the holes. It's going to take a couple materials to fill these. The first one is going to be grass. We're just going to hold shift and then right click on them. Then you drop sticks on top. And the last thing that we're going to need is firewood. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut down a tree real quick. There we go. You put the firewood into your crafting bar. You drop an axe on top. You cut it up into firewood. It is raining. So what we're going to do first is we're going to cover all this up real quick because the rain can put it out and we definitely don't want that to happen. So grab your firewood, put it on, grab a torch, and get it lit up. Okay, so I got plenty of wood here, and we're gonna dig a small hole. We're gonna be working with a 2x2 hole here. That'll do fine. We're gonna grab the firewood, and you shift click the ground, and there we go. We're gonna cover it up with dirt, but 1 block, just like that. We're gonna place grass, then firewood, and then light it. And if you put the fire pit onto the wood like that, it turns into a charcoal pit. I have another chest, and what I figured we'd do is we'd make a small cellar, if you can call it that. Basically, we're just putting a chest in the ground, and if we want, we can put food into it and cover it up. That will make the food last so much longer. Later on, we'll be able to turn it into a full basement, and we'll have better storage to make it last even longer on top of that. But for now, that is what we can do, and even that will help us a bunch. And our charcoal is done. We can use our shovel and pick it all up. This should be plenty for what we're trying to do. So now we're primed to get a campfire up, just like that. We can throw some coal into it. and 40 of our bits. That will give us 200 units. It takes about 100 units for each of the tools, which we're trying to get the hammer and the pickaxe. That'll allow us to go and get copper and not worry about scavenging anymore. But we lit the fire pit. The last thing that we got to worry about is tongs, which requires cattails to make some rope. Luckily, we got plenty. So let's make one rope. Combine it with a stick, and now we have tongs. So we need to put the tongs into our offhand, and we can put the crucible into our main hand, and you just hold right click onto the mold. We're gonna get a hammer and a pickaxe. And there we go. So after it's cooled down a bit, you can pick it up. You place in your crafting hotbar with a stick, and it turns into a pickaxe. Same thing with the hammer, and there we go. After all that work, we finally got a pickaxe. And we're gonna go get a whole bunch of copper. Alright, I found our very first one. As you can see, I marked it on the map, so I didn't have to do any searching, just a tiny bit of backtracking. What we're gonna do is we're gonna dig down a bit, and there should be plenty of copper directly under us. And there we go, native copper already. Let's pick up a whole bunch. And that was the last one. What we can do is we can take the hammer, put it on top, and we can smash it up into bits. We got 108 there. We're going to split it up. That way we can get 100. We're going to get that cooking again. And it's ready. We're going to take it out. And we're going to pour a prospecting pick. I can place that back down. And we're going to go to bed. And when I wake up, we should be ready to use that. And there it is. We craft that just like any other tool. And we have a prospecting pick. The reason why I made this right off the bat, instead of going for an anvil or any other tools, is because we do not want to stay in the Copper Age for very much longer. We're going to save all this, and we're going straight for the Bronze Age. So let me show you how to use the prospecting pick. Prospecting might seem overwhelming, because it is, but it doesn't need to be. To start prospecting, you obviously need a prospecting pick. It doesn't matter what material it is, but the better the material, the more durability you'll have, and it's pretty nice to not have to make a new one every once in a while. So make whatever you can afford. I do recommend you have a bunch of ladders on you. This will help for the actual prospecting and gathering of the ore that you want. So with the prospecting pick out, you press F, you have density search and node search. If you don't see node search, it might be disabled. When starting up a new world, it should be on by default. So if you don't see it, this is why. However, if you don't have it on an existing world, you can type in this command and restart your game, and you'll have it next time you log on. So the difference between these two is summed up to short range and long range. Long range is basically a chunk, and node range is determined by the setting that you had it at. So for example, this box being right here, the short range node search. If you were to mine this block right here in the very middle, it would be able to see if there was ores inside of this block. If you had it set down to a lower number, it would obviously shrink. But 8 in that direction, 8 in that direction, and so on. Even if you were to have an ore directly right here, it would still be able to see it. So when you're out and about, and you want to start prospecting, you want to just dig down. You want to go into the stone. You can ladder up to the surface again. This is why we have the ladders. You want to poke out a few holes going into the sides, little tunnels. Take out your prospecting pick, set it to density search, and mine the block on the very end. You need 3 samples, and each time you mine one of these, it needs to be 3 blocks away from each other, which is why we did it like this. So do one on each side, and the block that you did first is gonna be where it's around. So here's the last one right here, and there we go. You can see right here we have very poor of these 2 right here. For now, we're gonna go for the bismuth. That is used for making bronze. Now that node search on my map is gonna look like this. This is because of a mod called Prospecting Together. I highly recommend it, but it is not necessary. It's just a little visual guide here for me. And I can see the chunk that this was mined in. So just ignore this if you're not going to be using the mod. So because we found bismuth and it's very poor, what we do is we look at the map here, and we want to start collecting data around it as well. So some over here, up here, and down here. We're going to run about 100 blocks this way and do the same. Okay, let's do it again right here. Now you can see the bismuth stayed exactly the same. So I'm going to go up here now and see if it changes. And let's see how it does. So the bismuth has gone down, which means it's somewhere down here-ish. And there you go, it's already going up, which means that we should be continuing to take samples from around this area. So this is how it worked out. We looked around here to see if it raised at all, and it didn't. And I kept following it. It kept going a little bit higher as we went, up until right here, and I checked around it, and it kept lowering every single time. So the chunk that I'm sitting in has the highest likelihood of having the bismuth. I got really unlucky and it's still very poor. However, it's the best I'm gonna find in this area. I obviously could go start again somewhere else and we can look for much better. You can see right here it is still very poor, which means that there isn't any big veins in this area of bismuth, but there definitely is some directly under me, but it's not going to be super plentiful and it's going to be harder to find. But either way, we're going to try to find it. The way that I like to find it is I just go and dig straight down, obviously laddering up. Make sure you have an exit out of here. We dig down a bit, we take out the prospecting pick, and we do the node search. So we break a block here, and you can see all these blocks that are around me. If you want to go for any of these, feel free. However, right now we're looking for bismuth. It did not say that it found any bismuth, so we're going to keep digging down until it says something about it. Oh, and there we go. Bismuth, large amounts. So from here, we know that there's bismuth around me. I know it's not above me because I've been node searching all the way down, so it needs to be somewhere under me and in a direction. Oh, and here we go. Yeah, it was directly under me. And again, it said it's very poor. A lot of the time when you're doing this, you can find way higher amounts. And it's even easier to find because there'll be way bigger ore piles. So this was the worst case scenario. However, it was directly under me, so that made it incredibly nice. A lot of the time it's going to require you to dig around, as it could have been pretty much anywhere in this chunk. What I would recommend you do is do a ladder right here, where my pointer is. If you don't find anything in a while, with the node search, go make another ladder right over here. And if you don't find anything again, here and then here. And sometimes you need to go really far down. For instance, I had to go quite a bit. Other than that, I just wanted to give a couple more quick tips. Not all ore can be found in certain kinds of rocks. In my mind, it's kind of complicated, and I don't pay too much attention to it. But if you open up your handbook and type in the ore that you're looking for, you can see the stones that it can spawn into. In this case, slate, phyllite, peridotite, basalt, granite, and andesite. So I wouldn't be looking for bismuth inside of bauxite, and some ores will prefer bauxite, so it might be worth looking up for you. Also, the prospecting pick can't pick up every single kind of block. For instance, it can't find halite. However, you can find sylvite, which will be around it. So if you're going crazy not finding the thing you want to find, it might be worth doing a little bit of research. The last tip here is you should always pay attention to the words before the numbers. Let's say this bismuth right here said ultra high but had a lower number, and this one right here said very poor but had a higher number. You should be going for the ultra high one. That is much more important than going for the number. It can be daunting, but I figured this might help somebody getting into it. Welcome to my smithy. I'm here to show you guys how to work metal. It's insanely easy, and once you know what you're doing, you won't need me anymore. To start, you're gonna need yourself a hammer and some wooden tongs. The tongs go into your offhand, the hammer into your main hand. You might not have an anvil yet, so if you don't, you want to make yourself an anvil mold. There's a lot of other molds that are insanely useful. If you're not on iron yet, I recommend that you get yourself a pickaxe, a shovel, an axe, a prospecting pick, a hammer, and if you're going into melee, a Falx blade mold. These vertical racks are incredibly useful. They're pretty cheap. You can throw them on the ground and store 5 of these. But obviously, it can't store something like an ingot mold, which is another mold that you absolutely want. You can see here I have an insane amount, and honestly sometimes I wish I made more than this. And of course you want the anvil mold to create your first anvils. On top of that, you're gonna need some crucibles. One will do, but if you're trying to do multiple things at once, multiple crucibles would be nice. You're gonna need some fire pits ready, and depending on how many you want to do at once, determines how many fire pits you need. You're gonna need a forge. This allows you to throw any metal ingots into there, or items that you've been working on that went cold, in with some charcoal, which you can take a torch and light. In theory, you only need 1 piece of coal into this, and you can just use any sort of coal. Doesn't need to exactly be charcoal, and you can throw 1 into there. However, it might not reach its max temperature, and if you're doing multiple things at once, by the time you're done the last thing, it might just be cold again. A forge is super cheap, and it only requires a little bit of cobblestone in a shape like this. So now that you know what you guys need, let's get into it. By the way, I have freedom units on, so it's in Fahrenheit, but it doesn't matter because we can just match the numbers. And lastly, you're gonna need some sort of coal. If you hover your mouse over the coal, you can see its burn temperature. That's how hot it can get. And if you hover your mouse over the kind of metal that you're trying to smelt, you can see how hot it needs to be. So in this case with the copper, all of the coals will work. All you need to do to get it going is obviously put it into the crucible, and up here it'll tell you how many units that you're gonna get. You can see how many units are gonna be required for each mold, whereas most of these require 100. However, something like the anvil uses 900. So you can do the math and put the right amount in, that way you can fill out your required molds. Let's say that we're trying to get the anvil mold. We put 900 units of copper in there. We put a bunch of coal in there and we light the crucible. Now you can see it's getting hot, and once it reaches its smelting temperature, the little progress arrow will start, and once it finishes, we'll have an entire crucible of copper. And there we go. We can pick it up. Make sure that the tongs are in your offhand. You go up to whatever mold that you're trying to do, and you hold right click. Now you just wait, slowly starting to fill, and eventually it's done. In the meantime, I'm going to show you guys how to use a hammer to make tools manually. We just got to heat this up first, and you'll see it noticeably change color when it starts to get hot. And there we go, it's truly glowing. Let's grab one. You hold shift and right click onto the anvil, and you can go through this entire menu of things that you want to make. One of the first things that you're probably going to want is a copper saw blade. So you click on it, and when you hold out your hammer, you can see exactly where we need to hammer it out into. You can right click it to spin it. That way you don't have to keep rotating around the anvil. And if you press F, you can see all these options. I'm going to mess it up just for you, but the first one is heavy hit. You hit it and it goes all over the place. This is great for something like plates, where it's a big, large, flat surface. Then we have all the directions and one that's split, which just removes a piece. If you have one like this that is no longer in the bar and it doesn't fit any of this, but you still want to use it, you can click upset up and hammer it back on. But if you try to hammer something like here in the middle, it won't go up. It needs to be a corner piece and it'll go up. So now all you gotta do is you gotta play around with these. You gotta hammer them into the little green squares. If it goes cold, you can always just drop some coal into here again, light it, then you can pick it back up, and you can drop it into here. You'll see the number go up. Once it hits the temperature that you're looking for, you can pick it back up, place it back down, and you can continue working. Now some things are gonna require multiple ingots. Like you can see this plate right here. This amount is impossible to spread out into all this. So you can take another ingot and you place it on top. But this isn't the only way to get a plate. If we come up here into my automation, I can get my health hammer going, and I can just drop this on and you'll see it's gonna continue to do it for me. It magically pieces it together, it removes all the extra pieces, and it makes this process so much easier. However, it requires a bit of upstart to get this all going. Now that we have that done, and you know how to do some lightsmithing, you know how to get some copper going, there is a couple more that you can do, and I'm just gonna bring up this website for you. I highly recommend that you check it out. I'll link it into the description. Let's say you want to make tin. It's not just 1-to-1, and it does the math for you. So you know exactly how many to put in, and it's amazing. And there's a lot of options here, but you'll notice that iron and steel is mysteriously not on this. So that being said, let me show you how to make some steel. So the first thing that you're gonna need for this is some fire clay. You can find it around bauxite or under black coal. You make it into a little square pattern like that, and you'll get raw fire clay bricks. You kiln the bricks, which can stack up to 12 by the way, and after you cook it, it'll just turn into regular fire clay bricks. Now what you do is you can make a bloomery by aligning these bricks in this pattern. Once you've got a bloomery, you can make a bloomery chimney by doing this pattern. You can throw the bloomery down, and you're gonna need some iron nuggets, which comes in the form of these three right here. So you got the hematite, the limonite, and magnetite. If you mine any of these, it can be turned into iron. So what you do with them is you go up to the bloomery and you just hold right click onto it. It'll fill up at 120. Then you gotta fill it with charcoal, which it can hold 6. You take a torch, you hold right click, and it'll get going. In 10 hours, we'll have some iron blooms. Now it's done. So you can see it's still pretty hot. So make sure you still have the tongs in your offhand. Take a pickaxe and break the bloomery. It gives you some of your fire clay bricks back, and it gives you 6 iron blooms, depending on if you filled it up or not. You can take the blooms, you place it down on the anvil. With the split option, it's your job to break this slag up, all the little black pieces on it. You just gotta remove them all real quick. Then when it's gone, you gotta shape the ingots. Now there's a chance that there's not enough cubes to fill up this entire ingot. It looks like I do here. so I won't have any issues. However, some of them will. You can let a health hammer do it for you. It'll never have that problem. It will always be able to finish it no matter what, even if it doesn't have enough resources. And in my opinion, this is the best way to do it. And there you go. We officially have an iron bar. Do you want to look cool like this? Or have a bag that actually holds stuff? Well, I have a tutorial here for you. So what you need to get started is some hide. These are for full barrels. You can use less. However, I normally just stick to full barrels. You need 15 acacia logs or oak logs and 50 lime. You can get that by grinding down white marble or chalkstone, or you can use 20 powdered borax, which you can get by breaking down 10 borax. But I find the lime being much easier. You do need 3 barrels to make 1 barrel of leather, and you definitely need a knife. The other tools are just for making the barrels and buckets, which, speaking of buckets, you will need. I recommend you put an infinite water source near your buckets. It'll make it go so much quicker because you have to fill these all the way up, and you don't want to have to run out to the lake across that bear every single time you need one. So, definitely worth investing into. Once you have them full, you're going to need to grab your hide of choice. Rawhide being pretty easy. That's just a couple bears worth, and it's what I normally go with. You're also going to need your lime. What I've been doing is I've been getting white marble. You can find it pretty easily in mountains if you just look around. Sometimes you'll just see it on the edges, and you can take it, you put it into a quern, and you just grind it down into powder. 50 marble will turn into 50 lime. Same thing with chalk, and borax not so much. Once you have the lime, you can just drop it in. 50 lime to 50 liters of water will make 50 liters of lime water. Drop the hide in and seal. Now this is going to take about 20 hours to soak. So in the meantime, you want to grab your logs and you put 5 in there, and that will make weak tannin. And you want to do the other barrels as such. Now it's just a waiting game. So our soaked hide is done. We put that right into our craft bar and you put a knife over it. It'll turn into scraped hide, and we can throw it into the weak tannin and seal. Now our other thing of weak tannin, we throw another 5 logs into and we seal it. That will turn it into strong tannin. So now we gotta wait 3 days for the hide to soak. All right, our prepared hide is done. We take it out, we throw it into the strong tannin and seal. And now we gotta wait 4.5 days and it's done. Now we have 25 leather to work with. Do you want your base to be self-sufficient and practically have an infinite food source? Well, I have a video for you. Farming is so incredibly useful. The first thing that you're gonna need to know is that there is different kinds of soils, and it greatly affects how quickly your farms are gonna grow and how much nutrients that it gives your plants. If you find something like this, it's just called the forest floor. You cannot plant any crops onto it. This is low fertility soil. It will do in a pinch. However, I would recommend that you try to skip it at all costs. This is the one that most people will start with. It's called medium fertility soil. You can see that it is noticeably darker and it's pretty easy to spot. It can hold more nutrition, and this is what you should go for. There is 2 kinds of other soil. They are extremely rare. You can see that the high fertility soil is slightly darker than the medium fertility soil. However, it can be easily mistaken, but it is extremely rare. Terra preta is the best one of them all, and it's not even called soil. And for this, you actually craft it. It takes charcoal powder, bone meal, and compost. It is extremely expensive and you don't get much of it, but the goal is to eventually replace all of your farmland with it. However, the difference between medium and terra preta is only 19%, which is why medium soil is completely fine to work with. 19% seems nice, but that's only a couple extra days and isn't that big of a deal. However, the nutrients is very nice. So if you can't make terra preta, go for it. But if you can't, it's not that big of a deal. So after you've gotten your soil, you're gonna now have to worry about seeds. Seeds are extremely easy to find, but they are dependent on the biome and the average temperature of the biome. And some seeds can only be found in certain temperatures, as well as some of them can only be found in ruins. When you're out exploring, you want to be looking for seeds like this on the ground. You just walk over, you smack them a bit, and it might just drop you a seed. What I would always recommend for your first farm, as you most likely won't have a bucket on hand, is you find a source of water. Your soil will need moisture, and unless you have a water source nearby, you're gonna have to moisture it by hand, which that would require you to clay form a watering can. But this way, you get to just build into an existing water source, like a small lake, a river, a pond, anything would work. The best way for you to place your land would be like this. You just want to keep making 3x3s with the water source in the middle. Since these two are connected, it can be 2 apart. But as there's none back here, we want to end it here. We don't want 2 on this side. By the way, you're also going to need yourself a hoe. That way we can till the land. So the first block that you have the water source next to will be 75%. Then it'll drop down to 50%, to 25%, and eventually 0. You'll notice that the moisture also affects the growth speed. And it'll start at 18%, to 52, to 74, then 88. However, that was just for medium soil. And you can see that Terra Preta, the best one, gets 107% growth speed, then 90, then 64, then 22. However, since we were on the topic of nutrients, you can add nutrients to your farms, like making compost. You stick a bunch of rot into a barrel, you seal it up, and over a long period of time, it will give you a small amount of compost. And compost will give you the end nutrient with a little bit of the others. You can find something like saltpeter, which can only be found in caves. And it'll give you the K nutrient with a tiny bit of the N nutrient. Another thing that you can do is you can throw some bones into a quern. Over time, this will give you bone meal, and that will give you the P nutrient. If you found some sylvites, you can also throw that into the quern, and that will give you potash, which will give you the K nutrient, and is insanely nice for stuff like flax. All you have to do with your different kinds of fertilizer is you just right-click the soil, it'll add it on, and it'll last for quite some time, so you don't need to be doing this every day. Now, winter is coming, and your crops will die in the winter. However, we have a way around this. We can make greenhouses. Please don't worry about the water here. That is part of a mod. It just makes it look super nice. If you don't plan on using the mod, you just do what I showed you before. That will actually work better than what I have here and be more efficient. But greenhouses are super simple and they can save your crops throughout the winter. If you leave them too long, nothing will save them from that. If you hover over a crop, you can see that it still received cold damage. I left these crops here throughout the entire winter, and the coldest of winter can still negatively affect your crops. However, there is some crops that do better with the cold, and flax is not one of them. However, that being said, it was still worth it to grow these. You can see I still get plenty from them, just not as much as I would have, and I still get my seeds back. Even from the dead flax here, I still get my seeds back. And in some cases, I'm getting multiple flax from these dead crops. So even though that they died, it was still worth it to plant them. But yeah, let me go over greenhouses real quick. They're super incredibly easy to make. All it requires you to do is make less than a 14 by 14 room with a ceiling that is at least 50% glass. It doesn't all need to be glass. You don't need glass walls. They don't affect it whatsoever, but they can look super nice. And if you do that and seal it up, you'll see a little bonus on your crops that will give you an amount of heat and say it's from a greenhouse. By the way, the greenhouse ceiling doesn't necessarily have to be glass. It just needs to be translucent. So if you wanted to, you could even use ice. So if you go on top of a mountain, you can find this stuff called glacier ice. And you don't even need a pickaxe. You can pick it up with your hands. You can bring it back to your base and use that as some sort of window. Perfect for greenhouses. By the way, it will never melt. Glacier ice won't. If you somehow manage to get regular ice, that will. One of my last tips for growing is the way that I set up this greenhouse here is that it's got 4 plots. The reason behind this is so you don't need to use any of the fertilizers. Is every time you plant, you just rotate all the crops in a circle. So you start with N, then it goes to P, then to K, and then on the 4th cycle, you would have nothing here. You leave one of these empty at all times. In the cycle that it's not used, it will regain all of its nutrients back. And it's the easiest way to go about it without having to spend a ton of time trying to get fertilizers. And here's my last tip. Greenhouses don't need to just be for crops. You can use it for beehives or berries, even the fruit trees, or even cattails or tulle. So it's completely up to you what you want to do and how crazy you want to get with it. By the way, greenhouses are not great during the summer. You can see that it adds heat, which is great for winter. However, during the summer, that doesn't magically go away. So it might be damaging your crops during the summer, which can cause some big issues. One of the ways that you can get around it is by just breaking a block. Once it updates, the greenhouse effect will go away and it'll just be like everything was outside and will no longer add that effect. Hey, welcome to my kitchen. I wanted to show you guys how to do some cooking. Cooking is extremely easy, and believe it or not, you're gonna have to do a lot of it. And I'm here to simplify it. The first thing that you're gonna need is a fire pit. The main way that you're gonna be cooking food is cooking pots. Cooking pots are extremely easy to make and just requires a little bit of pottery. You can see cooking pot right here. You click on it, you just follow the cubes, you get them made, and once you're done, you'll get a raw cooking pot, and you just throw it into a hole in the ground with some grass, sticks, and firewood. Then you light it, and you gotta wait a little bit. But once you're done, it'll be cooked up, and you'll have a cooking pot ready to go. Crocks is the main way you're gonna be storing most of your food, so make sure to make a whole bunch. This is known as a cellar, which is used to keep your food lasting a lot longer, and all it really is just a room in the ground that light can't get to, and it's made out of materials like cobblestone, so your food can last a lot longer. If you hover over any of the items, such as the vessels, you can see its perish speeds, and vessels are the best for food. However, they don't hold that much compared to something like a chest, but the perish speed is worth using these for, and I highly recommend it. However, that being said, you don't need to be putting crocks into vessels. You can just leave them on top of shelves. Shelves are insanely easy to make. They're very cheap. You throw them onto the wall, and you can throw your food onto it. Crocks are insanely cool. As you can see, this will last 46.2 years right now, but it is sealed. If I uncrack the seal, it will now only last for 5.4 years. The way that you seal it is you put it into your hotbar, and you can place fat next to it to seal it. This is good for long-term storage, and that's how you'll be preparing for winter. However, there's another way that you can seal it, so I'm gonna crack it again, and this time I have honeycombs. You get honeycombs from beekeeping, which I have a whole nother video on it. But if you do that, and you can right click a bucket, it'll drop some honey into there, which is great for cooking food. But the reason why we're doing it right now is for the beeswax. Beeswax can completely replace the fat and can seal your crocks. And if you start up beekeeping, you'll pretty much have unlimited honeycombs. So you won't have to be burning through fat every time you're trying to seal everything. The last cooking item that you're probably going to want is a clay oven. This can also be a bit expensive. It's made just like anything else, like the bowls and stuff, but can only be made with fire clay. But this thing is so incredibly worth it. It's how you make bread and pies, which I encourage you not to sleep on. One of the main things that you're going to need is fuel, so a bunch of firewood. So for some basic food cooking, you can cook stuff right onto the fire pit. However, it's not amazing, and you should avoid it if you can. However, something like the raw bushmeat cannot be cooked into these pots. No stews, nothing. You just gotta cook it straight on the fire, and it's a pretty solid short-term food if you've harvested it from a bear or something. However, what you can do is you can throw it into a barrel. It is 2 to 1, so 2 salt to 1 bushmeat. You seal it, and in 20 days, you can get cured bushmeat, which in this case would last 4.5 years. But it's pretty bad at filling you up. You can also do this with red meat, poultry, fish, and it all works the same. With a cooking pot, you can start to make stews. If you want, you can do an entire red meat stew, or you can start removing some of the options and place like a turnip. It'll give you a little bit less food, but now you'll start getting some vegetable nutrients. You cannot make a stew with 1 meat and 1 turnip. However, you can do a stew with 2 meat and 1 turnip. But this being said, you can't do it with 2 turnips and 1 meat. If you do a combination of vegetables and meat, you have to have more meat. But what you can do is you can actually just make a whole vegetable stew. And of course, you can always mix vegetables, and it doesn't matter what order they go in. And you can also add fruit to this as well. So this right here would progress 3 of my bars here. Something that we can also do is make some porridge. We add 2 grains to the pot, and we can make a flax porridge here. However, you can use any of the grains. But we can also add honey to make a honey top flax porridge. We can also add some sort of vegetable or either some sort of fruit. However, meat does not work in porridge. With the potted food, you can make 6 servings at a time. A crock can only hold 4 unless it's modded. So you can see that this can actually make more than what this can hold. So what you would normally do is cook up 2 fire pits, and that would give you 3 crocks worth. Or you can always cook up 4 servings at a time by removing some. If you've done some husbandry like me, you might have some chickens. And if you do, there's a good chance that you might have some eggs. You can pick up the eggs, and you can throw them into your pot, and make some scrambled eggs. And of course, you can always throw in vegetables, but you can't add fruit this time. If you did have cheese, you can also add cheese to this. Let's move on to bread. For bread, you're gonna need to have some grains. There's 6 kind of grains here, and some of them are harder to find than the others, but something like rye, flax, and spelt are insanely easy to find and mass produce. You can see that flax is actually the worst of them to work with because it only gives you half of the satiety. So if you're gonna be making bread, I recommend you stay away from that and to use the flax grain to feed your animals. However, it's not that big of a deal if you do cook bread with it, to be honest. You'll just have to eat more. Once you've gotten your grain, you should bring it over to a quern. You don't have to automate it. You can just hold right click onto it if you want, and it'll slowly turn it into flour. To turn the flour into bread, you take a bucket, you right click some water, you add it into your inventory with the flour, and you see you get flax dough. So what you need to do first is go up to your clay oven, fill it with firewood, and you light it. You'll notice that the heat will slowly rise, which is exactly what we're going for. Right now, all we gotta do is wait for the firewood to burn up, and when we see it's gone, we know we're ready to cook. And there we go, it's ready to cook. All we had to do is take our flax dough, we throw it in there. It can take 4 at a time, and now we can watch it. Over time, we'll notice it change color, and we can see it grow. You can take it out at any time, and depending on how cooked it is, it will lose or gain nutrients. Right now, it is part baked, and you can see right here, it'll give 70 saturation, and isn't the best. Right there, it is fully cooked, and it'll give it 160 saturation, so more than double. But we can let it cook even longer, and let it char, and there we go. That will give us 100 saturation. However, it is not useless. The partly baked bread will last for 9 days. The fully cooked bread will last for 14 days, but the charred bread will last for 31 days. A little bit more than double. That is not the only thing that we can do with it. You're gonna need a table. They're very cheap, just require some boards, and you can place it pretty much anywhere. The reason why we need that is because we cannot place the bread on any other surface, but we can onto a table, and that makes a pie crust. What you can do with it is you can fill it up completely. Right here I used meat, but you can use vegetables or fruits. I believe you can also use cheese. After it's done, you place another bread on top, which at this point you can in fact cook it, but you can use your bread again, and you can add a fancy pattern to it. I also want to mention that you cannot mix and match different kinds of foods. So if you add one meat, you gotta fill it with meat. Once your pie is done, you just go and throw it into the oven and cook it the same way that bread is made. Now to eat the pie, you gotta throw it on the ground. You take a knife, any knife will do, and you just right click it. It'll give you 4 slices and is an amazing food source. Now I do have one more food to show you guys, and it's the jam. Jam is insanely nice and it lasts a crazy amount of time. So jam is insanely easy to make. All it requires you to do is have 0.4 liters of honey to 2 berries, and you get 1 serving of jam. You can use any of the other berries as well, and it really is just that simple. And once you cook it up, you'll get yourself a crock of jam. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but you actually can eat the honey. It doesn't spoil. However, it's not amazing and it's a bit expensive. You don't get the wax, but it is an option if you're looking for one. Are you trying to be a beekeeper? So let me show you how. The first thing that you'll need to do is find a wild beehive. You'll know it by hearing this or being really lucky and spotting it. You'll see the little bees flying around it, and you might not see the hive at first, but you can start removing some leaves. But be very careful. If you break the wrong leaves, it could break the hive. So once you've found it, what you should do is place down a bunch of dirt directly under it, on top of the tree. Make yourself a way up. You don't have to worry. It's not dangerous as of right now. They'll leave you alone. But make yourself a little platform up here. It doesn't need to be too big, but enough room to fit some flowers on it. So once you've gotten a platform up, you need to get some flowers. There's a whole bunch of them, and this isn't even all of it. But if you hover over it, on the very bottom it says flower, and you'll know that those will work. Personally, I really like horsetail. I think it looks really cool, and you can find an insane amount in bulk. So that's what I'll be using. You don't need too much of it here. For the best results here, 26 is the best. It'll make it swarm extremely quickly. So once you have that up, you can just place down a skep somewhere. It needs to be in range of all the flowers. The skep can see all the flowers that are in a 7-block radius of it, horizontally, and 5 blocks vertically. Once you have the skep down, you need to just let it wait for a bit. And to see if your flowers are affecting the beehive, you can come up to it. Right now it says there's 0 flowers, but we know that's wrong. It just hasn't updated yet. By the way, you don't need 26 flowers. The absolute minimum that you can have is 7. But the more that you add, the quicker that it will swarm to here. So you can see right here, it's 23, and that isn't quite max. What we could do is just extend the platform a tiny bit if we cared that much to do it, and it should update, so it should be max very soon. You'll see that the population right now is large. For you, it could be very small, but just give it a little bit of time, and eventually it'll get large enough that it'll be able to swarm. It'll give you a little countdown to when it will swarm. But yeah, that's the first step. We just need to wait for it to swarm. So this is what we've been waiting for. You can see that it says it will swarm in less than a day. Now we just give it a little bit of time and it'll swarm right into this. All right, our skip is now populated. So what you need to do is make sure you have an empty backpack slot. You walk up to it, you control and click. Now it's in your backpack slot. If you want to be able to access it, to place it down, you hold control and use your mouse wheel to scroll over it and you can just place it down. However, we're going to need this to start up our bee farm. Now, bee farms aren't an exact science. You can make them as big as you want, have the skeps as close as you want, and use whatever flowers that you want. But for now, I'll show you how to make a reasonable sized one. So what you're going to need is to make sure you have that skep, obviously, and you want plenty of empty skeps, along with some fences to keep out all the raccoons from trying to steal your honey. And it certainly doesn't hurt to have a gate on it. And you need all your flowers ready. So what you're going to do is throw down a quick fence real quick. The most optimized way of doing this is throwing down a skep and having it 2 blocks away from the fence, and then 2 blocks away from the fence this way as well. So then we can just box that in. And when we want to add another one, we just go over another 2 blocks and then place. And same thing with this one. Make sure this is 2 blocks out both ways, and we can go around it. We can place another one right there and one right there. And we can fill that in. You probably want to add the populated skep right to the middle one. That way it can spread to all of these a lot quicker and easily. And you can add the rest of the skeps here. What I would recommend you do is leave this spot open to place down a dummy. When you're breaking these, bees will try to attack you, and you can have them try to attack the dummy instead. So once you have the fences done, you want to come in here and throw down a ton of flowers. Fill it up completely. The more the better. Over time, this skep will spread into each of these. Depending on how much flowers it can see, the better it will do. So for harvesting, what you want to do is you actually just want to smash it. It will give you some cattails back, definitely not all, and it'll give you some honeycombs. After breaking a couple, you'll notice that bees might come out and try to kill you. Here they are. What you would normally do is you would try to lead them over here to the dummy and they'll try to attack it. However, something that you can do to not get attacked by them at all is keep a torch out and they'll hover around you, but they won't even go for you. You can see I'm not in creative mode or anything, and they just leave me alone. Even though they're flying around me, they don't attack me. So I highly recommend you do this. It'll save you a lot of annoyance. This is a beehive kiln. It's incredibly useful, and not even exaggerating, it can save you thousands of grass and sticks. Not to mention, it can make a ton of cool blocks. So to get this thing made, you need a fire brick kiln door. It's made with these materials right here. You need 9 fire brick gratings, which is made with these materials right there. You need 55 fire clay bricks, and again, the materials are under it, and 3 iron hatch doors, which requires 6 iron plates or 12 ingots if you want to go down that route. So first thing that you need to do is grab all the materials that are required, just the stuff that's in my hotbar right now. You need a semi-flat space. It doesn't require that much. You want to place down some fire brick, then the kiln door directly on it. You control and right click it, and it gives you this neat overlay that you can use to build on. So you want to start filling it in right here on the 3 sides that doesn't have a door, so you can place the hatch door. Once you have the walls done, you want to start placing the roof. Then you want to come in here and place your grates. There we go. It's now done. So the next thing that you want is to have some sort of staircase that goes down here. We're going to be laying down our firewood here, and I don't recommend that you have dirt under it. That will grow grass and be incredibly annoying. So at least get this to be some sort of block. It doesn't need to be fire clay, but something that won't allow vegetation to grow on it. So you want a 3x3 here, and then you can make a little wall like this, and there you go. You can make it all fancy like I did here. I have a path that leads up to it. You're obviously going to need to get into it. So if you want, you can do something simple like this. All right, so now it's time to show you how to use it. First thing you want to do is place whatever items you want to smelt. In this case, we're going to do blue bricks. I'm going to be going for the large black brick. You can stack the bricks up higher than you would a normal kiln. Right here, we have it to 24. So that will allow us to make a lot more. You don't need to completely fill this thing up, and you can place things randomly like I have right here. We close the door. We come down here and we want to fill up the entire bottom. What I like to do is don't fill this block up yet, and I light the middle one, then I fill it up. Now it should light a little bit quicker and a little bit more evenly. It's gonna take about a day for this to finish, so I'll see you once it's done. And here we are. If you open this as soon as it's done, it'll still be hot. You can pick it up with tongs, but you can just leave it a little while and it'll cool down on its own. So anyway, guys, I hope this helped. It's definitely worth investing into early on. It'll save you so many resources and give you a ton of cool blocks to work with. So now we're getting into some advanced stuff, and we're gonna make steel. What you're gonna need for this is an iron anvil, a pulverizer, which does require a windmill, by the way, and it requires you to have a refractory brick oven, otherwise known as a cementation furnace. Your main hurdle for this is to get these refractory bricks. They are quite expensive, and if you want to make the tier 3 ones, it requires crushed quartz, crushed bauxite, crushed olivine, and crushed ilmenite, all of which can be found with prospecting, except for the olivine. It also requires fire clay, by the way, I want to make that clear. On top of that, mortar, which is going to require lime, which, as we all know, can be a pain to find. But that being said, there is 3 tiers of bricks, and the first one is much easier to find. It's just quartz and bauxite. The bauxite can be a little bit trickier to find. However, quartz is one of, if not the most common kind of ore to find. So the first thing that you need to do is get yourself an iron anvil. It is not made like the previous anvils where we poured a mold. You need to smith out the bars into the 2 pieces, the iron anvil base and the anvil top. You gotta throw the bottom into a forge. Same thing with the top. You get them both lit up, and you're gonna need to find borax. Borax is kind of difficult to find, but you can do it with prospecting. You take it and you throw it into a quern. So once that these are hot, you pick up the bottom, you place it down, then you place some borax on top of it. It only takes 1. You pick up the anvil top, you place it on top, and you take your hammer and you just keep whacking it, and it'll finish and it'll stop glowing. It's really just that easy. Now for the other materials that are required for the refractory brick oven. You need quartz and bauxite, and you're gonna need the pulverizer. And you guys might not have this little hopper system I have here, but you can do it by hand. You just right click onto it and you'll stuff it in. But for me, I just get to throw it into the chest. I'm gonna do 1 of each into each chest, and you can see it just burn right through it. So to get these bricks up, we're gonna go with tier 1s for now. We just got 2 stacks. However, I'm just gonna make another 2 to make sure I'm good. Each tier of brick breaks a lot quicker. As this is my refractory brick 3 oven, it is lasting multiple bakes. However, a tier 1 oven will probably last only 1. I have Beehive kilns, which makes this process go so much quicker, and it can hold a ton without me spending too much fuel. But just know that you can use the regular kilns and it'll work just the same. I close the door and I get it lit. And in a little bit, those will all cook up. By the way, if you're curious about this kiln, there's a section of this video where I show you guys it and how to make one. So other than the bricks, what you're gonna need is an iron door and a coffin. It doesn't need to be granite. It can be any of the blocks. It does require you to get some regular rocks and not just the little stones that come off. Use a chisel and hammer to turn it into a coffin. You make 2 of these and you make 2 lids, which also does require 2 borax. Now you're also going to need some mortar. So one of the first things that we need to do is we need some quicklime. So you throw some lime into a campfire, you put some coal under it, and you cook it up. After it's done, you need to fill a barrel with water. So I'm going to fill it up with 30 because it takes 4 lime to each liter of water to turn it into slaked lime. You just throw it in and you're good to go. However, that being said, it is 1-to-1, and as you can see, I can drop my sand into here, which is the next step. We can't drop a stack that's bigger than that to match the 120. So we're just gonna grab our buckets, and anything extra, I'm just gonna throw into a different bucket. But now this says 60, which I can in fact make a stack of 60 sand. So I'll drop it in, and bam, 480 mortar. All you have to do is drop the mortar into the middle of your crafting bar, take your bricks, and wrap it around. It'll turn it into these big bricks. All the steps above work with any of the tiers of bricks. However, tier 3 does require you to have steel pounder caps, whereas the other 2 require you to have iron pounder caps. So you had to do this at least once with tier 1 or tier 2. But if this is the second time you're doing this, do everything the same, but just add the extra resources when you're trying to make the bricks. Now to get this started, it's incredibly easy. With the bricks, you also need to craft yourself a refractory brick rating. It's made almost exactly the same as the other bricks that we made. However, we leave out the bottom one and the top one. Now we take the grating, we place 2 of them, we put the coffins on them. We add the lids, and we can shift click the coffin itself, and it gives us this outline so we know where to place everything. So we can start this by adding more grating here and here and here and here. We have bricks in the front, and we place a door right there. Now all the other blocks shown just need to be filled in with the bricks. And once you've placed all the bricks, it should almost be done. Now there's one last thing that we need to do, is we need to make a path under it. What I like to do is I fill in this 2x3 at the very end, so you can see it lines up with the gratings. Then I place 2 slabs on the sides. For now, I'm going to place a slab there, but I'm going to add this to it. That is just a chiseled up block. It doesn't even need to be this. And alternatively, if you really wanted to, you can make it slabs. It would make it a little bit more difficult, but that's fine. I like the chisel block there. You can get really close. And the reason why we did this is so that we can place coal into here and we can see it and reach into the back. And this right here stops the coal from spilling out onto you and hurting you. So now we're pretty much done. You hop into the furnace, you go up to the coffin, you place some charcoal, 4 things of ingots, charcoal, more ingots, charcoal, ingots, charcoal, ingots. Then one last thing of charcoal. You place the lids back on top, and when you hover over it, it says it's ready to be fired. But once you're ready, you just fill this up with coal, and as you can see, it stays in place, doesn't fall onto you. Then you light it, and there you go. Now, if you run up to the door, you're gonna get burned if you stand here. However, you can open the door, but if you hover over the coffin, you can see its progress. Right now it's at 0%, but over time it'll complete. You're gonna have to come back here and refill this every once in a while, and it's really easy with this little thing that we made here. If it goes out, it's completely fine, and you can resume at any point. So after about a week and 40 charcoal, it's now complete. You can see it says it's complete, and all we gotta do is we gotta break into it. It might be hot, so you might want the tongs on you, depending on how quickly you noticed it was done. But we got 16 blister steel. Now here comes the last step, okay guys? I know this has been a bit much, but we're finally getting there. We're just gonna light it in the forge, make sure it's really hot. And once it is, you can pick it up, drop it on an anvil, which, by the way, an iron anvil works for this perfectly fine. And you gotta remove the slag again. You remember this from the iron. Luckily, this is a bit easier to shape and shouldn't cause you too many issues. So yeah, that's how you do it. However, that being said, you know where I'm gonna go with this? Why would we do that by hand when we have automation? Actually, I can answer that for you. Because the wind dies down and sometimes you gotta do it by hand. But if the wind is actually going, you can just let the help hammer do it for you. So much easier, so much lazier. But it gets the job done most of the time. Automation is so incredibly cool, and it allows you to do some crazy stuff that can save you so much time. But before I get to all this, let me show you how to make one. So the first thing that you need is some wooden axles, some angle gears, some large wooden gears, sails, and a windmill rotor. Basically, for the most part, it's pretty easy. You want to build up nice and high. You can press Ctrl and V, that way you can get your coordinates. And you can see that I'm at 131 height. You at least want to be 120. Every block above 120 will give you 1% more power. You want to place these wooden axles out far enough that once you place the rotor like this, which I recommend you do it on a block like that, makes it very easy. You don't want to drop it on the ground from all the way up here. You want to make sure that the windmill rotor is placed so once you add some sails to it, it won't collide with any of the roofing or even the ground, because if it does, it'll destroy the sails. So once you have the rotor down, you got to place your sails. It has to be placed 4 at a time, and it can take 4 sets of 4, and that'll be the max amount that one can take. You're going to want to connect it up to a big gear like this. You don't have to, and I'm not going to get into the crazy math that is required for this, but basically know that little axles and little gears create speed. Big gears like this create torque, and you need torque to get everything going. I had to cram a ton of stuff into this small space, so none of it is perfect, and I just did what I could do. By the way, you can place gears on gears on gears, so if you need to do any sharp angles, that is the best way to do it. So it goes all the way from up there to into this one right here, which uses even more small gears into this big one, which uses even more small gears off, and that's why it's going so quick. You can see right here it's going really slow into this one, which makes it go a lot quicker, and potentially you could keep doing what I did here and make it go quicker and quicker, but then that would require a lot more power, and this is all I could squeeze out of it. But yeah, you can see how fast this thing is going. So immensely nice, which I will get to this little system in a minute, but let me finish showing you guys the rest of this. So if I hit this switch, Now the pulverizers go super quickly. But let me get into some of the automation. Automation has changed how I do things in this game, and I know it will for you as soon as you see this. This is a pulverizer which is completely automated. Let's say I want to pulverize some quartz. I can just throw it into the back of these two chests. Then we hit the switch again. It gets going. And it just spits it out into the hoppers. And because I'm in such a tight space, I had to throw the chest downstairs. But you can see it just keeps pouring into it. And yeah, this will save you so much time. It's just a little bit of copper added to it. And it's just chests on top of them that get fed into the pulverizer, into a hopper that goes directly into another chest. That's it. That's all it requires. Real quick, I wanted to show you guys how to make some of these. To make a helve hammer, you need a helve hammer base, then a wooden toggle, and you place the helve hammer on top of the base. It's really as simple as that, and you can connect your power right into the side of the toggle. Easy as can be. The pulverizer requires a pulverizer frame. You drop it down, and you can see right here where it's slanted. So once it's done pulverizing, it'll shoot right out the front. You do need 2 pounders. You drop them in, a pulverizer toggle, and 2 pounder caps. If your pulverizer looks like this, then it should work. And you can connect the power right into the side again. The quern is super cool. You're gonna need to power it through the bottom. You bring it up a couple blocks. You drop the quern down. You place a chute over it, a chest on top. You place down some hoppers directly under it to the side of it. And again, if you wanted to, you could always block up all the sides but one. But under the hoppers, you just drop some chests. When you hook up a power source, it should just work. All of these are really just that easy. So I hope this video helped you guys out. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next time.